Let me read to you a passage from the 11th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 29 to 32. It's the Gospel for Monday after the 28th Sunday of Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, "While still more people gathered in the crowd, Jesus said to them, 'This generation is an evil generation. It seeks a sign, but no sign will be given it except the sign of Jonah. Just as Jonah became a sign to the Ninevites, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. At the judgment, the Queen of the South will rise with the men of this generation, and she will condemn them because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and there is something greater than Solomon here. At the judgment, the men of Nineveh will arise with this generation and condemn it, because at the preaching of Jonah they repented, and there is something greater than Jonah here.'" That's from Luke chapter 11, verses 29 to 32. Among other things, it speaks of what I would call divine patterns, of which Jonah and Solomon were examples. What do I mean? Well, one of the many reasons why the moral quality of parenting is so critical is that a child's parents and what they say, being the first human influences in the child that the child knows and accepts into his soul, become patterns and types for the child's future experience. Those who are like his parents in belief and culture are more readily accepted by the child. The child's moral standards tend to be those followed and taught by the parents and primary persons of the child's emerging life. What the child sees and hears in his parents, in his guardians, educators and early companions tend to be types of in the child's mind for what it is to be human and for how a human being should act. They are, let us say, the myths that provide the basic framework of life. It is not at all easy to transcend and leave behind the influence of these origins. For this reason, a conversion to a different religion or church, or the passing over to a profoundly different political party, can amount to a great leap, which the majority may never take because of the power of fundamental myths or paradigms. Those origins, as in the remembered events and persons that constitute them, tend to be the patterns for life ahead. They make sense of new persons, new events, experiences. Now this is entirely wholesome and natural. Families, tribes, communities and nations have their myths, their remembered origins, their heroes, their received paradigms and criteria for life and action. It is the way God has made us to function and to grow, provided, of course, the process is progressively disciplined and guided by correct and objective criteria. We cannot be entirely bound by such paradigms because they themselves are but human and prone to error, at times great and tragic error, which must be transcended and renounced. The good news is that in the matter of what is most important of all, religion and our relationship with God, God has not left us with human influences alone. He has revealed himself over time, in fact over a long time. In the process he has provided us with a rich fare of entirely reliable and objective myths and paradigms, inspired and historical, which are our guide for true religion. The greatest and most wonderful guide given to humanity is the living person of Jesus Christ, one who walked the earth at a certain point of history and who lives now in all his glory, not only at the right hand of God in heaven, but with us in his body the church. He is the true and objective myth that gives meaning to everything, but in his case, the myth is a hard and objective fact. The point I wish to make here, though, is that our Lord himself was preceded by the great origins in history of God's dealing with his chosen people. These origins and this history constituted a progressively unfolding set of paradigms and pointers to what was coming, namely the Messiah himself. Their purpose was to enable the promised one to be interpreted and accepted when he came. It was all part of a piece, and a person who was steeped in the holy writings and who was submissive to their divine author would be equipped to receive the Messiah. Our Lord himself frequently, clearly, and with originality showed how he fulfilled the Scriptures and how the Scriptures pointed to him. He appealed to their figures to illustrate himself. If we ourselves are steeped in the inspired writings prior to Jesus Christ, the Old Testament, together with the spirit of submission to God who authored them, we shall be equipped in a special way to appreciate his person and his teaching. The figures and events that people those writings are types of him and his work and teaching. Our gospel passage today that I read earlier from Luke chapter 11 verses 29 to 32 offers an illustration of this very important point. There were many who were, in a reluctant and recalcitrant fashion, challenging our Lord to prove his credentials to them by providing them with signs from heaven. He dismisses their demand. He was providing such signs continually in his miracles, and appeals to the sign of Jonah and Solomon. Both these figures were, in their limited ways, types of the one to come. They illustrated him, and he evoked their memory as inspired illustrations of his divinely ordained way of working. They are two instances of many other types of the one who would be the fulfillment of all. Jesus Christ is the new Adam. He is the new Moses. He is the prophet. Jonah pointed to him, as did Solomon, but he was far more. Let us enrich our appreciation of Jesus Christ, the Lord of Lords, by immersing ourselves in the Gospels, first of all, of course, and then in the rest of the New Testament writings, but also in the inspired writings before Jesus Christ, the Old Testament. Let us follow the Church's liturgical practice in respect to the proclamation of the Gospel. She serves up for our contemplation the entire Holy Bible. She points to Christ, but with Moses on one side and Elijah on the other, and they are conversing with him as they did on the Holy Mount. They pointed to him and were types of him, enabling us all to appreciate the one who is the summit of all,